KFSR and CMAC present the Central Valley Ledger, a public affairs program featuring stories from all over the Central Valley with Sevag Tateosian, 90.7 KFSR.
I'm your host, Sevag Tateosian. Welcome to the Central Valley Ledger. We're here on the beautiful campus of California State University, Fresno. We're actually in the Mass Communication and Journalism Studio A with Professor Faith Sidlow. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
And we've been on this program before, and when we were in the studio in downtown. Much different setup here.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. You've had a very interesting career in broadcast journalism, and so tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've been here at Fresno State for, I'm going on my 7th year now. I have worked at Channel 24 for 28 years.
Why is it that you got into the business? I mean, did you just wake up one day and say, I want to be on TV and a news reporter, or talk a little bit about how you got involved?
I went to San Diego State and I majored in journalism. And when I graduated from San Diego State, my first job was as a reporter at Channel 24 and started as a weekend reporter and worked my way up to a weekday reporter and started anchoring the morning news.
What was the toughest, of the many jobs that you've had in this industry, what is the toughest, would you say? I mean, you know, what is the toughest?
That's a difficult question. There are, I would probably say the toughest part of being a reporter was doing stories that were difficult about children.
And one of the questions I wanted to ask you, which we'll talk about right now, is tell us a story that, well, tell us the first story that you ever covered, or one of the first stories that you ever covered.
The first story I ever covered, the first story I ever covered was in San Diego as a radio reporter. I'm trying to remember, it was so long ago, was when there was a young man who was accidentally deported across the border. He was an American citizen, but he was mistaken for an undocumented immigrant, and he was deported, and I believe he was 12 years old, and taken across the border and just dropped off by Border Patrol agents. And I was awakened in the middle of the night by my editors from KNX News Radio and told to go to the border immediately because he was being returned. And so that was one of the first stories that I covered that I remember specifically, other than, you know, small news conferences and so on. One of the first stories I covered in Fresno was Mount Ansel Adams.
Oh, interesting.
When that mountain was being dedicated, and Robert Redford was out there helping to dedicate the mountain. I had been here for just a couple of weekends and was sent out with a photographer to go and cover that. So it stands out in my mind. Not really a fascinating story, but it was a fun adventure going to Yosemite to do it.
It sounds like in this work you met a lot of interesting people. You learned a lot. I mean, is that true? Did you learn a lot in the process of making these stories?
Oh, absolutely.
Talk a little bit about what your first role was. I know you were in radio, so let's dig into that a little bit more. So you started as a radio reporter, and then how did you go into television?
So I started as a radio reporter. The first job I had was actually as a volunteer working for the radio reading service in San Diego for the public radio station. Back in the day, it was a little transmitter that people who were blind could get the receiver from the public radio station, and then the volunteers would actually read newspapers, and people who were blind or could not see would be able to get the daily newspaper read to them, and they would hear it over the
Very interesting.
yes,
That sounds so interesting.
over this receiver. And so that was my first job, I guess you could say, over radio. And then at the same public radio station, I became a paid board operator. And then from there, I worked into a vacation relief news anchor and also a field reporter. And from there, I became the San Diego reporter for KNX News Radio, which was a Los Angeles radio station. And then I also started working for a all news radio station in San Diego, which has now become defunct. And from there, became, after I graduated from San Diego State, got my first job here right out of college at Channel 24.
Did you ever think you would end up in Fresno? I mean, of all the opportunities out there, and when you were growing up in this industry, did you ever think, I'm going to end up in Fresno one day?
I don't think I really thought about where I was going to end up. Something that I do tell my students is that if you want to get a job in television news, you have to be willing to end up anywhere. And I was willing to end up anywhere. My colleagues or my peers ended up in Reno, Alaska, Hawaii. They were in Peoria. They were all over the place, and I ended up in Fresno. So it was just, I would have gone anywhere. And I'm glad that I ended up in Fresno. I was actually close to my family, so that was a good thing. And I ended up making lifelong friends here. I got married here. My whole family's here now. This has turned out to be where my whole life is. So it was a good thing.
And you were on television here for a very long time. Can you repeat how long you've been involved in this community?
Well, on television, 28 years. I've been here in July. It will be 31 years.
Congratulations on that. I can say we're glad you came here because you've contributed so much. I mean, one of the other guests in the studio recognized you right away and mentioned the television station that you were on before. Do you get that a lot? I mean, when you go out to the store and carrying on your life, do you get that a lot? Like, excuse me, I know you from somewhere.
It's, I know you from somewhere. Weren't you my kindergarten teacher? That's usually what it is. Yeah, they think they know me, but they can't quite place who it is.
You could have moved after you started your career here. You could have moved anywhere you wanted, but you chose to stay here. Is there a reason for that?
I set down roots. Yeah, it's hard when you get married and you have a family. My husband couldn't leave, and so it's difficult once you're here. And I really was very happy and very comfortable in the job that I had. There was no reason for me to leave.
And you're still giving back now. Share with us your involvement now on campus.
Well, I teach broadcast news. I am the professor for the broadcast option at Fresno State. In fact, we are sitting on the set where my students have their sports broadcast, where we do Fresno State Focus, which is the weekly news and public affairs show. And I am absolutely amazed by the programs and the work that my students do. They work really hard and put together some amazing stories, and then after they're done with their semester where they do this broadcast, they walk out of here and get jobs in the industry.
Recently, there was something that you were a part of here that was broadcast around the world, different campuses. I heard about it and I smiled because I thought, what a great opportunity. Share with us the story of that.
It was the Global News Relay, and it was a huge accomplishment for all of us. We were the hosts of a 4.5-hour newscast that involved 12 universities around the world. And it was a collaborative effort with universities in England, Australia, Lebanon, the United Arab Emirates, and other universities in the United States. And we put together this broadcast that was themed on sports in your community. And the students here did their own stories, and then they incorporated stories and broadcasts from the other universities, and they worked really hard on putting this together. And it aired on March 18th, And you can see it still. It's on CMAC, and it's also on our Fresno State YouTube channel. It was a great accomplishment.
It sounds like a wonderful collaborative effort. Do you think the students learned from that?
Yeah, I do. They did learn a lot of different things. They learned a lot about deadlines, and they learned a lot about working together. They also they learned, I think, a lot about how different universities in different countries do their news, and about the cultures of different countries. Some of the things that were really interesting is working with the students from Beirut, for instance, and we worked with students who were from the media literacy program in Beirut. They had never before done broadcast stories at all, which was really fascinating.
Fun.
And they worked so hard, and they were really into putting together these pieces. So that was really touching for us. I mean, really emotional, actually, to have them work so hard to put this together, and a lot of fun to see what they came up with. And yeah, I mean, these are people who were doing stories on a ban on fans not being able to attend soccer games, and only after 4 years of not being able to attend were they able to attend, and on women not being able to play soccer, and a lot of discrimination, and really interesting stories, not things that we are used to experiencing here in the United States.
It sounds like a fascinating project, and I'm glad it's available on Fresno State's YouTube channel and on the CMAC channel. Do you foresee more projects in collaboration with other universities like that in the future?
Oh, I hope so. As a matter of fact, we're involved in another one. I haven't told my students about it yet.
Oh, wow. We get the exclusive. Yeah. Thank you, Faith.
With the university in Great Britain, with Coventry University, we are involved in another project right now that I have just begun to work on. It's another international project. That is kind of a pop-up news project, and I'm in the beginning stages of that one, so I'm not going to share too much. That won't be happening until later on in the next semester. And yeah, there is just so much that deals with the global news that is so important now, because really we are a global industry now. News is global, and it should be, and we should be really looking at it that way. So I expect to be doing much more of that. But also our students are involved in a project now with Cat Public Radio, where we are doing something called 100 Young Voters, where they're working really hard to get the Latino voter, their voice out. And if you go onto Instagram and you look at the hashtag 100 Young Voters, you'll see some of their work there too.
It sounds like the industry is changing rapidly. I mean, in your last statement there, you mentioned Instagram, YouTube, World Wide Web, multiple campuses working together. Did you foresee this when you started in the industry years ago? I mean, it's going to an area where everything is connected.
Well, years ago, I mean, I didn't even know what a cell phone was, right? I was working on a manual typewriter. In fact, my students make fun of me because I still pound my Mac really hard because I started on a manual typewriter with carbon copies.
It's a perfect place to talk about the partnership between Fresno State and CMAC. You know, this program on radio is at KFSR, that's where the program started, and then we started doing it at CMAC Studios, and now we're back here on the beautiful campus at Fresno State Studios. So what's going on with Fresno State and CMAC? Tell us about that partnership.
Well, we are so blessed, really, to be involved with CMAC. For one thing, we have Terry Dolph, the engineer here in our studio, who we are so happy to be able to share with CMAC, and he comes here and helps us with everything from keeping all of our equipment in great shape to helping our students learn the equipment and keeping me sane, which is a big job in itself, but also for our students to be able to go over to CMAC and to be members over there and use all of the equipment and take the classes there, and just to be able to have this exchange, because we have people from CMAC who are here right now crewing your show. So it's this great collaboration, which is all what CMAC stands for, right? Being here, and the students that are here that are down, and when the Chinatown parade was happening without the rain, being able to be down there and to crew that. So all of these things going back and forth and making these great productions, it just really, it is the epitome of what a collaboration can be and should be.
So inside the studio, it's buzzing with activity. You know, in the control room, we have multiple volunteers from CMAC and students. In the studio here, we have a volunteer working the cameras and directing the floor. What is this a benefit? So if students are involved and say, you know, I want to volunteer on the Central Valley Ledger or other programs like that, do they get a benefit, in your opinion, for that?
Oh, absolutely, in so many ways. I mean, they get to interact with the CMAC volunteers. The CMAC volunteers get to interact with the students as well. And the students here get to learn more and get more hands-on experience. So it's a win-win for everyone.
Now let's shift gears and talk about your students in your classes. Are these students that want to go into television or radio, or do they have an idea of what, are they just kind of learning the atmosphere of journalism when they come to your classes?
I would say it's all of the above. It's been very interesting because some semesters I have students who definitely know what they want to do. Last semester I had one of the most unusual classes. I had 12 students, and of all of the students who graduated in December, of the 12 students who graduated, 11 of them had jobs, are working in jobs.
I want you to repeat that, because that's kind of not normal for you know what you hear in the media and stuff.
Shocking.
So 11 of the 12 have jobs already lined up.
And one got married and had a baby.
Well, okay.
Yeah. So it's 12 out of 12 basically, right? Yeah, 12, 11 of them have jobs.
That is incredible. Are they local or are they all over?
So let me see. A few of them are local. One of them is a producer at KC24. One of them is in production at KC24. One is a reporter in Bakersfield. Two of them, one just left for Wyoming. So two of them are in Wyoming. One is in Yakima, Washington. Another one is in Eugene, Oregon. One is in Salisbury, Maryland. I mean, they're just all over the place. But yes, they all got jobs. The semester before, just a couple of them did. But they, you know, some of them became teachers. This is a great major for people who want to get into any kind of profession that involves any kind of communication. I should add that one of them who graduated the semester before also got into a social media job. So it's great for people who want to get into jobs that involve social media, because one of the things that they do in this major is social media.
And social media sounds so important these days in broadcast journalism and reporting and all that. I want to ask you a little bit more about Fresno State and the Mass Communication and Journalism program. So it's like any other major. They go in, they get their degree. Are there specialties and the reason I'm asking the question is, if someone wants to be, let's say, a writer, they go through the same classes, would you say?
Well, the idea behind journalism in general is that you want to have a broad liberal arts background, right? So you don't want to just study journalism, you want to study everything. So you take your general ed classes and then you take your journalism classes, but you also want to have some electives in some other fields. And it would be a good idea really if you took a minor in something like political science or history, so you have a good background in some other field. When you come into the journalism major, you have a few choices. You can study you can study public relations or advertising or broadcast journalism, print journalism, or multimedia production. Those are your choices here. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you very much for that. And because people all the time will wonder how they get involved, and I'm sure you get it all the time, how they get in the industry, or what advice would you give them if they want to become reporters and stuff. So the education aspect is important.
My advice, if somebody wants to become a reporter, besides going to school, and people do become reporters without going to journalism school. They may go to college and get a degree in political science or history or economics or English. And it's always a good idea, though, to have a college degree, although there are journalists, famous journalists, who did not have college degrees. But that's, the exception to the rule. My recommendation, though, is when you get your college degree, is to definitely get an internship, definitely get some kind of hands-on experience so you find out whether you like this job and whether you can do this job. So that would be my advice. Definitely get an internship and really get as many internships as you possibly can. Those students who got those jobs, almost every single one of them had at least one internship, and most of them had several internships. And so they knew they liked it for one thing, and they also had, with every internship, more and more contacts.
Tell us a little bit about, when we watch the news, the broadcasters, they're energized, they're telling stories, they're reporting interesting stuff. Is it difficult? Is it a difficult job? Some people may think it's easy, some people may think not. In your opinion, is this a hard field? Is this tough work?
Well, I suppose everything's relative. It's not brain surgery, right? It's definitely not that. It depends on what you compare it to. There are some aspects that are extremely difficult. When you watch devastation, that's very difficult, right? But like brushing your teeth, if you do the same thing over and over, it becomes easy, right? It's as difficult as you make it.
Tell our audience about the difference between regular writing and writing for journalism, if there is such a difference.
There's a big difference. Writing for broadcast journalism as opposed to writing for print journalism or for English composition. For broadcast journalism, we try to write conversationally. So if I'm writing for broadcast journalism, the goal would be for me to write just the way I'm speaking to you right now.
Interesting. So we're running out of time this week on the program. Can you talk about how people can find out more about the Mass Communication and Journalism Department here at Fresno State?
Yes, there are several different ways you can do it. You can go to Google, that's the best way to find out about anything, and just Google MCJ at Fresno State. So MCJ Fresno State, and you'll find our website, and there are several different areas that you can look at. You can look at all of the different options. You can look at the faculty and staff, and you can find the different clubs that we have that we offer. You can also go through the different courses that are offered and the different options. And of course, if you would like more information, you can contact any of the faculty and we'd be happy to talk with you.
I wanted to ask you this, before I let you go, I want to ask you, has this job gotten easier with technology? You just mentioned Google, so research is very important in your role as a journalist. Has it gotten easier?
Yes and no. Technology overload. I complain all the time about the email problems. There's just so much information now to sift through. I'm not sure if it's gotten easier or more difficult because there's just so much to curate now. So yeah, it's so much easier. I don't have to tape teleprompter scripts together anymore or, split the carbon copies apart, right? Now I can, take my columns and copy and paste everything. But, and yeah, I can definitely go to Google and find the information. But there's a lot of information.
Professor Faith Sidlow, thank you so much for being on the program this week. And I want to tell you something. I'm a fan of yours. When you were on television, we used to watch you. And so it was pretty cool when I interviewed you the first time and now the second time. So just know that you have a lot of fans still out there that are very interested in you years after you've now are at Fresno State instead of on television.
Well, Sevag, thank you so much. And I'm a fan of yours too.
Thank you very much. Thank you for tuning in to the Central Valley Ledger. Thank you to our volunteer crew that made this production and every production possible. Also, thank you to the Fresno State students. The control room is buzzing with activity. The studio here is buzzing with activity, and we are very thankful for everybody that made this production possible. To those listening to this broadcast on KFSR 90.7 FM, and to those watching on CMAC, Comcast 93, and AT&T 99, we hope you enjoyed the show, and we hope that you learned a little bit more about the Fresno State Mass Communication and Journalism Department and the cool things happening there. We're here in the studio at beautiful California State University, Fresno. Thanks again, and tune in next week to a new edition.
KFSR and CMAC present the Central Valley Ledger every Sunday morning at 11:30. For a complete program schedule, visit kfsr.org.
Thank you for watching the program. See you next time. Bye.